Be seated, please. This meeting of the Senate for Friday, the 17th day of April 2026 is called to order. Before we begin the business of the day, as is custom, when a former member of the Senate transitions, we make reference to them, and specifically we speak today to the passing of Honorable Hugh Hart, former member of the Senate from 1983 to 89, served as Minister of Mining and Energy and the Minister of Tourism during that period. Also known for his, or recognized for his contribution to the legal profession as a founding member of Hart, Muirhead, and Fata. But this morning we acknowledge him for his contribution to development of this Jamaica land we love through his contribution in the Senate of Jamaica from 83 to 89. And I ask you to rise for the usual moments of silence. May his soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine upon him. Thank you. Of course, it would be remiss of us not to note passage of noted Jamaica singer, songwriter Ernest Smith, who passed away yesterday as well. I would ask the clerk to write to the family of former Senator Hart and indicate that his passing was recognized in the Senate today. Senator Johnson Smith?
And if I might just, if you could allow me to just read into the record some further aspects of Mr. Hart.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the Senator.
Record.
Absolutely. Yes. And Senator, if you wish to say a few words, you may also as well, because I know that you are acquainted with him through his contribution to the legal profession.
Indeed, Mr. President, Mr. Hart was not only a former member of the Senate, but indeed a distinguished foreign minister and a well-respected member, not only of the legal fraternity, but of the private sector fraternity in general. And apart from his achievements and participation, he was just generally known to be a true gentleman, a decent and upstanding gentleman, always known for the highest integrity. And I must say, I recognize that my start in legal circles, certainly my inserts, as we know, those of us who did law here in service, was done at Clinton Hart, and my first job was at Clinton Hart after he had already left to start Hart Muirhead Fata. But it was indeed the firm started by his father. The firm still bears his name. So I just wanted to read into the record of Hansard some of what is already in the public domain, but just to ensure that it is here. And in fact, these words were shared publicly by the chairman of the party, Mr. President, but they bear reference and are worthy of the record. He was a giant who served his country and his party well. He served with great pride and competence in a wide range of issues, including across the public and private sectors. His skills as an attorney are well-renowned and were well-renowned beyond Jamaica's shores, such that his loss is grieved. His passing is noted a tremendous loss to Jamaica and the region. He was a legal luminary, a private sector leader, and an accomplished and shrewd policymaker whose skill at his craft was noteworthy and impactful. He served as a member of the Senate, as you have noted, Mr. President, between 1980 and 1993, as Minister of Mining and Energy between 1983 and 1989, and as Minister of Tourism between 1984 and 89. He was a director and former chairman of Jamaica Flour Mills, former chairman of Carreras Group, the Jamaica Bauxite Institute, the Bauxite and Alumina Trading Company, PCJ. He did so much, and he gave also with a willing heart, Mr. President. I know there are some here that would want me to note that he attended the Monroe College in 1940. And as is stated here, he became one of the most outstanding students in academics and sports.
True.
He was not a contemporary of Senator Hill, no. But to know, Mr. President, that he then went on to study externally, where he continued to excel in cricket, hockey, and tennis for the sporting enthusiasts who always like to remember their exploits in similar contexts, Mr. President. So I just ask that his memory, as recorded by Hansard, also include these elements, even as we join you, Mr. President, in extending sympathies to his family, to his friends, to his colleagues, the fraternity here and overseas. And again, we ask that his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scott Motley. That I've taken both of you off guard because normally we would have waited a bit, so I apologize.
Might be me, but not Minister. But when I became aware of Hugh Hart, I was on the periphery politics as a member of the PNP-YO. But it was obvious at that time that Mr. Seaga, who was then Prime Minister, placed quite a bit of reliance on his skills and his brilliance as a negotiator. Of course, where the leader of our party is concerned, he had a strong personal relationship with Hugh Hart, joining his chambers in 1993. And he describes Hugh Hart as one of the best commercial drafters. Perhaps it is that influence which would make one be able to say that Mark Golding is known as a brilliant drafter. So people come into your lives and they influence you in different ways. I adopt all the encomiums which a minister has made about former Minister Hart. I acknowledge his service throughout the different years, different stages of his life. And what I will say is that there are some people who serve no matter where you put them. They serve as leaders of sporting activities, leaders of political activities. They serve even amongst just, ordinary service. If you know what I mean, they're the ones who will go on and be, can I give you a cup of coffee? And that is because service is in their DNA. So on his passing, I speak on behalf of the People's National Party when I acknowledge the contribution he has made, not just to the political sphere, but to the nation as a whole, and in particular to the political arena. I send my condolences to the family, if it pleases you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. When you are making the relevant communication with the family, you can include the relevant parts of the transcript, relevant transcript in relation to the contribution of Scott Motley and Senator Johnson Smith. Okay? Thank you very much. Members would have noticed that we have actually 13 visitors today from the University of the West Indies, and they are from the newest hall at University of the West Indies, Mona, the George Allen Hall. So none of you can claim that you know any of them or that you were in the same hall, because that hall is only 7 years there. So they're from the leadership program of George Allen Hall, and we want to welcome you to the Senate today. As I point out, you are always welcome, and particularly members of the University of the West Indies, who the country places so much reliance on for your future contribution to the country. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate are the following: annual report and audited financial statements of the Real Estate Board and the Commission of Strata Corporation for the financial year 2019-20. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Jamaica Agricultural Commodities Regulatory Authority for the financial year 2018-2019, and its related ministry paper number 21 of 2026, titled Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Jamaica Agricultural Commodities Regulatory Authority for the year ended March 31, 2019. White paper number 1 of 2016, titled National Destination Assurance Framework and Strategy. Under the Auditor General's Department Certified Appropriation Account, head 2,829 for the Supreme Court for the year 2012 to 2013, head 2,852 for the Legal Reform Department year 2019-2020, head 20,000 Ministry of Finance and the Public Service year 2020 to 2021, head 20,000 C Ministry of Finance and the Public Service 2020 to 2021, head 27,000 Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs year 2021-2022, head 27,000 Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs year 2022 to 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bills brought from the Honorable House of Representatives. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the Senate, motions for leave to introduce bills, the presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained, public business. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today it is intended to pursue the passage of the affirmation of the Casino Gaming General Regulations 2025, and to take through its concluding stages to open and take it through its concluding stages the Act to amend the Jury Act 2025. And we will take the matters in that order. If I may apologize from now, Mr. President, just to indicate that I will be stepping out of the Senate briefly to pay my respects to an old friend, and I ask your indulgence and permission and the understanding of colleagues. Minister Morris Dixon and Mr. Hill will undoubtedly make sure all continues well in my absence, and I will return to close the. Indeed, And I'm so happy for that. You would have no idea. Mr. President, it is my honor to lead the debate on the Casino Gaming General Regulations 2025, the passage of which will form a critical part of bringing to life the nascent casino gaming industry in Jamaica. These regulations have been made by the Casino Gaming Commission pursuant to the powers granted under Section 72 of the Casino Gaming Act 2010, hereinafter referred to as the Act, and the Act came into force in June of that year. They have been drafted with the intent to safeguard both the well-being of patrons and the integrity of operations, to protect Jamaica's reputation and to meet international standards for financial crime prevention. Mr. President, they've been approved by the Minister of Finance and the Public Service. They have been affirmed in that other place, and they are now before the Senate or nation in turn. Mr. President, I want to give a bit of background before I enter into the regulations themselves, and I want to start with the matter of the integrated resorts development, because at the heart of these regulations is the drive to provide a further boost to Jamaica's economy by diversifying and enhancing our tourism industry, which is a major contributor to Jamaica's GDP. It is our largest generator of foreign exchange, and as importantly, maybe even more so, it is one of our largest employers. So while Jamaica's tourism product is generally, or tourism product offerings are generally well known and celebrated, there is great potential in other areas long awaiting being tapped. And one of those areas is before us today. So we have for some time been paving the way to strengthen our tourism competitiveness in this way. That is by stimulating investment in integrated resource developments. And as noted, the Act came into force from 2010. So this has been work in progress for some time. IRDs, including luxury hotel rooms, luxury shopping, entertainment facilities, and casinos in particular. Because remember, this is a product that's placed at a particular level to build into a particular demographic or tap into earning from a particular demographic. And that should always be kept in mind as well. But this has great potential to diversify, enhance, and further expand Jamaica's attractiveness and sought after tourism product. Mr. President, the Casino Gaming Act was intended to facilitate our entry into and subsequent regulation of the casino gaming sector. And one of its principal objectives is to encourage the establishment of IRDs, of integrated resort developments, by licensing these developments to offer casino gaming as part of a mix of various tourism amenities and facilities available to the guests of such hotels in such developments. So this is a package of amenities and not an intention to establish standalone casino gaming. And it's not that casino gaming doesn't exist in Jamaica already, because there are gaming lounges that are managed and regulated already, but that is, and even as acknowledged by the opposition in that other place, they operate at a different level. And it's not quite the type of product that is anticipated here. So under the Principal Act, again, by way of reminder, Mr. President, the Minister responsible for finance may make an order declaring an integrated resort development to be an approved integrated resort development. And then members will recall that in 2021, we passed the Casino Gaming Amendment Act, which amended the requirements for application for an approved IRD, so that over the past however many years, we have not stood still. We have continued to review the processes and to improve the framework, as we continue to do today. So the 2021 Act amended the requirements to enhance the regime and to strengthen its appeal to potential investors. So that once approved, in order to operate a casino within an IRD, the developer must then make an application for a license from the Casino Gaming Commission. And as has been noted elsewhere, and is a matter of public record, it was only last year that the first application for a license was submitted to the Commission. Mr. President, again, I'm providing this context by way of reminder and also by way of information for those who may not have been following the trajectory since 2010, and to set the proper context for consideration of the regulations today, so you recognize that they sit within a wider body of instruments, a wider framework, an ecosystem, all intended to work together to supplement each other with oversight from the Casino Gaming Commission to ensure successful entry into this new space within the tourism product. Mr. President, allow me to say just a little bit about the Commission. It's established as a body corporate under the Act to do a few things: to ensure that casino gaming is regulated efficiently and effectively, to protect children and other vulnerable persons, to ensure that casino gaming is conducted in a fair and open manner, and to prevent casino gaming from becoming a source of crime or disorder or being used to support crime. So right up front, Mr. President, we're clear that not only the social aspects, not only the economic aspects of the product are being considered, but the social aspects are also being considered for regulation and protective action by the relevant authority. And continuing on that theme, I would point out that the Commission is also the designated competent authority in respect of casino gaming under the Proceeds of Crime Act, under the Terrorism Prevention Act, and under the UN Security Council Regulations Implementation Act and the regulations that are made thereunder. So all the concerns about money laundering, about counterterrorism financing, around proliferation financing, all of those are already addressed and anticipated for management and regulation and oversight by the Casino Gaming Commission. So the legislative framework demands that all casino operators must operate according to robust, well-documented, auditable internal controls and minimum standards prescribed by the Commission. And I will say a little more about that ecosystem when we get into the regulations. But I share that on the harm minimization front, we should note a few things at the start of this debate. One is that the Act not only recognizes the protection of vulnerable persons, including children, and so important it is that the objects of the Act recognize this as upfront, and the functions of the Commission embed this responsibility. Secondly, the Act clearly prohibits admission of children into casinos for the purposes of gaming, and that's persons under 18 is how it's defined, not as children. And this is crystal clear, and the offenses and the penalties, therefore, are clearly set out in the Act. Furthermore, the Commission's responsible gaming framework, which is already completed and approved, available online, those who may not have had a read-through yet. And this will work together and be operationalized further through the license conditions and the regulations, which allow for their monitoring and implementation, monitoring and enforcement. So the framework itself is premised on the concept of harm minimization, as I've just indicated, Mr. President, and includes the advertising guidelines. The first pillar is individual, and this emphasizes player awareness and self-control, yes, because recognizing, and I know the issue of health, and I'm sure Senator Thompson will speak a bit more of this, and I'm sure members on the other sides, the mental health aspect of addiction, etc., that is dealt with in a context, but requires a level of acknowledgement of the problem by the individual in order to be helped, and that's internationally recognized. So that's part of the effectiveness, is recognizing the role of individual. It doesn't stop there. It does include responsibilities of the operator themselves in terms of having procedures in place that will not only be responsible for ensuring staff is trained to identify problem patrons or patrons who may have a problem, but there are other operational requirements which will throw up risky patrons and ensure that processes are in place. Procedures which are auditable and enforceable are in place in order to do this. The guidelines also reference third parties, such as family members, ensuring that they are aware of, they have the information that's required regarding where to get help in the event that they identify that either personally or their family member has a problem with gambling. Mr. President, it speaks to the framework, speaks the operator's obligation in this regard to not only understand or receive information, but to help in the event that they believe that there is a need for help in a circumstance of harm, actual harm, or anticipated harm. Mr. President, there are organizational pillar as well, which works, they're all holistic, they work together, ensures that mechanisms are built into the operator's internal controls to promote skills in safeguarding patron welfare. So this is what I was referencing when I was saying staff will be trained in order to identify problem gamblers, essentially. And that's a part of the ecosystem of enforcement and something which will be auditable as well. And something for which consequences will flow. And then community pillar, which creates an ecosystem to allow the commission, the casino operator, and all stakeholders in the local and international gaming industry to increase knowledge, skills, and enhance effectiveness of detection, prevention, and treatment activities and programs. And I can just say upfront that there is already an MOU between the Casino Gaming Commission, Rise Life, and they are a civil society organization, an NGO located here in Jamaica that already has responsibility for the issue of addiction in its many forms, including gambling. So they already work with the BGLC in terms of managing what exists now, but they are ramping up their understanding, and the Casino Gaming Commission is engaged with them and also has engaged with the Responsible Gambling Council of Ontario, who is providing support to Rise Life and the Commission to ensure that there's an ecosystem to provide for the operationalization of support, because we all know, those who are aware of Rise Life know that it's a small institution and would require significant support to enable it to now be able to support in this new framework. So that is underway and something that is being thought of not only from a practical perspective, but one that is looking at not only international best practice, but international partnership to ensure effective and appropriate implementation. So, Mr. President, all of that being said, it's clear that casino gaming is a significant undertaking, and it requires this much of a specific, dedicated regulatory framework. So along with the Act and existing regulations, because remember, this is not the first, nor shall it be the last, there are several regulations that have been implemented over the years. This will, Mr. President, complete, but this today will complete the framework that will allow for licensing to actually start. Mr. President, as I stated, the first license application was made last year, and the regulations have been carefully calibrated and developed to achieve maximum effectiveness of the Commission in the finalization and granting of a license, whether to this current applicant or any other. The regulations were formulated based on best practice discerned from collaboration with international partners, such as the International Association of Gaming Regulators, Gaming Laboratories International, the UK Gambling Commission, and the Alcohol and Gambling Commission of Ontario. The Commission also reviewed legislation and practices from Nevada, New Jersey, Singapore, Canada, and Bermuda, and they are constantly renewing their education and understanding, Mr. President, having, I understand, even recently participating in a responsible gaming conference, again, making sure what is being done by the Commission is not only, was not only once best practice, but is current best practice, and takes learning from more mature jurisdictions that have more experience in the space. And what we understand is over the several days of the conference, there has been great assurance that Jamaica is on the right track to ensure effective and responsible implementation. So, Mr. President, the general regulations are crafted in a manner to allow the Commission to leverage existing relationships and best practices while also maintaining flexibility that's needed. Remember, these are also commercial entities and also in a developing space where technology may change things. So we seek to have a balance between the existing best practice and flexibility to adapt to changes in the international casino gaming regulatory framework. So accordingly, general regulations state broad principles and adopt an outcomes-based approach, meaning in several circumstances, they state the goal or the intended outcome rather than the specific prescription. And this will, together with supplementation by licensing and the internal controls they're required to implement, form the full institutional framework. And this will also allow for responsive regulation, as clearly legislation is not the most responsive tool in a developing sector. So flowing from these general regulations, Mr. President, the Commission has also created the following additional framework documents with which operators must comply as conditions of their gaming license, casino gaming license. 1, their minimum internal control standards. 2, their minimum surveillance and security standards. The responsibility gaming framework, including advertising guidelines, which I mentioned already, as well as the AML, CFT, and TPF guidelines. Mr. President, it's important to note that the guidelines restrict local advertising and advertising using social media. So they actually will not be able to use billboards and use Jamaican traditional media to advertise casino gambling. That is already provided for and will be a condition, therefore, of the license. It bears re-emphasizing that it doesn't ban social media, but it restricts how that is implemented, but it bans full front-facing traditional advertising for casino gambling. It also, in this context, therefore, bears re-emphasizing, Mr. President, that while local residents are not excluded from participation in casino gaming, it is being introduced in Jamaica as part of a tourism-geared product through and within the scope of the IRD framework. So the government is not excluding Jamaicans, but the government is not creating a framework which targets or relies on Jamaica for their success. So the casinos will not be standalone offerings, and you will not be able to just walk off a street and enter a casino and start to gamble. That is not the framework. It's a part of a resort, right? So you will either have to be a guest at the resort or having entered the resort on some day pass or whatever framework that hotels have. But it will be managed very tightly. Mr. President, these regulations also establish the foundational rules that govern administrative processes of the Commission, obligations of licensees, record keeping and reporting requirements, regulatory fees and procedures, powers of inspection, investigation and enforcement, and general standards necessary for the orderly and transparent operation of the industry. So I'll now just go into the regulatory provisions themselves, Mr. President. So Regulation 1 states a short title and name. Regulation 2 states some critical definitions that are relevant to the operational conduct of casinos. 3, 4, and 5 makes for the organizational structure of the casinos. And this is important because unlike other forms of gaming, these are actually quite high risk and high value sectors. So organizational structure is important. Regulation 6 and 7 provide for staffing and reassignment of staffing functions within the casino. Mr. President, to maintain proper conduct and supervision and control, casinos are required to maintain staffing in keeping with internal control standards approved by the Commission and as per the directions of the Commission. Regulations 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 address the internal control standards. Mr. President, they also address accounting procedures. And these provisions, in summary, require the implementation and compliance with internal control standards approved by the Commission, and and maybe it just bears emphasizing that the reporting requirements and other minimum standards and guidelines, including the responsible gaming framework and advertising guidelines, are expected to be monitored and audited by the CGC under these regulations. That is the 8, 9, and 10, 11. They reference the internal the internal controls and the minimum internal control standards, which must be implemented. And there are not only offenses created if there's a failure to so do, but these are also relevant to your license and your ability to renew your license. There are consequences for non-compliance. So although I refer to a responsible gaming framework, it will have consequences and will be directly enforceable through the regulations, which I have just numbered. Mr. President, regulations 13, 14, and 15 address the need for establishment of a compliance committee. And again, this is part of the ecosystem of enforcement. So they outline the composition of the compliance committee and its functions, which will, among other things, include preparation of a compliance plan to govern the operations and the monitoring of these operations in accordance with the plan, as well as the provision of guidance and directions to ensure compliance with internal control standards. Mr. President, Regulation 6 addresses the power of inspectors and authorized persons to determine compliance with the minimum and approved internal control standards of the casino. And 17 to 27 makes provisions of the records and accounts that are to be kept by the casino operator, who is to maintain all financial records and reports in accordance with IFRS standards. Mr. President, 28 to 32 address the provision of credit to patrons, the credit policy, credit agreement, and records of credit facility. And these provisions are in keeping with international standards in circumstances where casino extends credits to its patients and to its patrons. And when you look, they're quite extensive, and the requirements. When you see how many guidelines are in place, you get a sense of how strictly regulated the sector is and will be. Mr. President, the regulations 33 to 44 address certain important requirements on casino surveillance and security, which are important features to ensure fraud prevention, safety, and regulatory compliance. Regulations 45 to 52 address patron disputes and complaints, where the Commission can elect to intervene in a patron dispute or handle a complaint after carrying out certain investigations. Mr. President, Regulation 53 to 59 addresses gaming equipment, the standards they need to meet, which are standards issued by the Gaming Laboratories International LLC, which provides the gaming industry with testing services and the application for approval of gaming equipment, among others. I noted that in another place there was an issue raised around this, but it didn't seem to be quite clear. Jamaica doesn't have a history in game tech assessment, and therefore, we're not creating a unique product here. So one would anticipate you would take the best, use the best, and ensure that the best processes, standards, and technologies in place to assess the effectiveness of the equipment that is provided for use in Jamaica. So we're quite confident in the framework that has been established here. Regulation 60 to 65 addresses the gaming machines themselves, applications, modifications, and related issues. 66 to 71 delve into the conduct of gaming. They address issues such as the prohibition of allowing intoxicated persons to gamble, issuance and redemption of chips, use and payment, and permissible use of chips, among other things. Mr. President, 72 to 84 address table games, dealing and shuffling, the making of wagers, the closing of game tables and game machines, the duties of persons in specified offenses, among other things. And regulations 85 to 88 address progressive casino games, such as progressive jackpots. Many of these things are very new terms to me, Mr. President. I don't know if they're new to you, but there's quite a bit of learning to be had in going through these regulations. But the reality is that the Casino Gaming Commission has really been very forward-leaning in ensuring that they have learned from the best, they have examined the best, and they have taken the most useful and clear standards to apply to ensure that what we do here is in fact best in class. Mr. President, 89 to 90 addresses commission facilities, and the casino operator in Jamaica is required to provide and maintain appropriate office facilities and equipment for commission officers, employees, and agents in order to do the monitoring, etc. And this is in keeping with best practice elsewhere. 91 provides for general offenses and penalties. The first schedule contains a detailed table game equipment technical standards and requirements, which are extensive. Mr. President, the second schedule contains relevant offenses and penalties, and the third contains gaming machine tokens, technical standards and requirements. Again, best in class, best practice has been drawn on. So, Mr. President, as indicated at the start of my presentation, the government continues to diversify and enhance Jamaica's tourism product while responsibly strengthening its appeal to potential investors. And while with these regulations in place, the framework needed to operationalize casino gaming in Jamaica will be fully in place and ensure that the first casino, which I think is a matter of public record, is expected to be with the Princess Resort Group's IRD. I don't think that's the name under which they have incorporated, but we are more familiar with Princess, and that it opens under clear, modern, and enforceable regulatory conditions once they have completed their process. Mr. President, the regulations will safeguard both the well-being of patrons, of guests, and the integrity of operations. They will, I again emphasize, they will protect Jamaica's reputation, and they will meet international standards for financial crime prevention and for responsible gaming. And it is in this context, Mr. President, that I commend the Casino Gaming General Regulations Resolution 2025 to both sides of this House for affirmation. And I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. And we understand we have to leave at least for a period of time. Senator Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to situate my contribution to this debate within a broader and deeply consequential policy architecture now emerging in Jamaica under this administration, one that includes beach access and management policy and proposed National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, NARA. So this is not merely a debate about gambling, Mr. President. It is about who owns Jamaica's development pathways, who benefits from it, and who is being systematically excluded from it. Mr. President, the regulations established the operational